Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone." The August heat shimmered off the asphalt like liquid fire as Ethan Caldwell's pristine Bentley Continental GT wheezed to an unexpected halt on Oak Street. Steam billowed from beneath the polished hood. A mechanical mutiny that his commanding presence couldn't intimidate into submission. Ethan sat trapped behind the wheel, his perfectly tailored Armani suit suddenly feeling like a prison in the suffocating heat. "Unbelievable," he muttered, checking his platinum Rolex. The board meeting at Caldwell Enterprises had already consumed 3 precious hours, and now this breakdown would derail his evening completely. At 38, Ethan commanded a business empire worth $1, $2 billion, yet he sat powerless against a rebellious engine. While waiting for his driver, movement across the street captured his attention. A small figure sat on an overturned milk crate in front of weathered duplex homes with peeling paint and sagging porches. The child appeared no older than 7, her dark skin glistening with perspiration, her tiny frame nearly swallowed by a faded pink dress that had seen countless washings. Ethan's irritation began transforming into curiosity. The little girl cradled something in her lap with reverent care, as if holding the crown jewels. As his vision sharpened, he identified the object, a porcelain doll with golden ringlets and an elaborate blue velvet dress, clearly an antique piece belonging in museums rather than a child's hands in this impoverished neighborhood. What shattered Ethan's composure wasn't the doll itself, but the cardboard sign propped against the crate, written in careful, childish purple crayon. "Beautiful doll, $5, please help." Below, in smaller letters that made him lean forward, "My mama needs medicine." The sight struck him like lightning. Ethan Caldwell, who negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions without flinching, who terminated hundreds of employees with clinical detachment, who prided himself on emotional armor, felt something fracture in his chest. The child's head hung low, small shoulders trembling, and he realized with growing horror that she was weeping. Without conscious thought, Ethan turned off the engine and stepped out of his car. The heat hit him like a wall, but he barely noticed as he crossed the street, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the cracked sidewalk. As he approached, the little girl looked up. Her eyes were the most beautiful thing Ethan had ever seen, large, expressive, and filled with a combination of hope and desperation that no child should ever have to carry. Tears had carved clean tracks down her dusty cheeks, and she clutched the doll tighter to her chest, as if afraid he might snatch it away. "Hello there," Ethan said softly, crouching down to her eye level. His expensive suit would be ruined by the dirty pavement, but for the first time in years, he didn't care about such trivial concerns. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Lila," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the distant hum of traffic. "Lila Harper. That's a beautiful name," Ethan replied, forcing his voice to remain gentle despite the storm of emotions building inside him. "And this is a very beautiful doll. What's her name?" Lila's grip loosened slightly, and she held the doll up for Ethan to see more clearly. The craftsmanship was exquisite. Hand-painted features, real hair, clothing that appeared to be individually sewn. This wasn't a mass-produced toy. This was an heirloom, something that should have been treasured and passed down through generations. "Her name is Celeste," Lila said, and her voice broke on the word. "My grandmama gave her to me before she went to heaven. She said Celeste would always protect me and keep me safe." Ethan felt his throat constrict. "She is absolutely beautiful, Lila. But if Celeste is so special to you, why are you trying to sell her?" The question unleashed a fresh wave of tears. Lila's small body shook with the force of her sobs, and Ethan instinctively reached out to place a comforting hand on her shoulder. She didn't pull away, which somehow made the moment even more heartbreaking. "My mama's real sick," Lila choked out between sobs. "She can't get out of bed anymore, and she's burning up with fever, and she keeps coughing up blood. The medicine costs too much money, and Daddy left us when Mama got sick." Her voice trailed off, and she looked down at her lap. "What did he say, sweetheart?" Ethan prompted gently. "He said Mama was too expensive to love," Lila whispered, the words coming out in a rush, as if she needed to expel them before they poisoned her completely. "But that's not true. Mama's worth everything in the whole world, so I have to sell Celeste to buy the medicine, even though it breaks my heart. Mama needs to get better." Ethan's hands clenched into fists at his sides. What kind of monster abandoned a sick wife and child? What kind of man walked away from his family when they needed him most? The protective rage that surged through him was foreign and fierce, directed at a man he'd never met but already despised with every fiber of his being. "How long have you been sitting here, Lila?" he asked, working to keep his voice steady. "Since this morning," she replied, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "Mama doesn't know I'm here. She was sleeping, and I thought maybe if I could sell Celeste, I could surprise her with the medicine and make her all better. But nobody wants to buy her. Some people walked by and said she was pretty, but then they just kept walking. One lady said $5 was too much." The casual cruelty of adults dismissing a child's desperate attempt to save her mother made Ethan's vision blur with rage. $5 less than he spent on a single cup of coffee at his office, less than the tip he left his barber. This precious little girl was willing to sacrifice her most treasured possession for an amount that wouldn't even register in his daily expenses. "Lila," Ethan said carefully, "what kind of medicine does your mama need?" She reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. Ethan unfolded it gently, recognizing it as a prescription from City General Hospital. The medication listed was for severe autoimmune symptoms, expensive drugs that could easily cost hundreds of dollars, even with insurance. If Nora Harper didn't have adequate coverage, the full retail price would be astronomical. "Have you eaten today, sweetheart?" Ethan asked, noticing how thin Lila's arms were, how her dress hung loose on her small frame. She shook her head. "I'm not hungry. I just want Mama to get better." Ethan's heart shattered completely. This 7-year-old child was starving herself, sitting in brutal heat for hours, willing to sell her most precious possession, all to save a mother who probably didn't even know where she would. The pure, selfless love radiating from this little girl was more powerful than anything Ethan had ever encountered in his boardrooms or bank accounts. "Lila," he said, reaching into his wallet, "I would like to buy Celeste from you, but I think $5 isn't nearly enough for such a special doll. How about we say $50? Her eyes widened to the size of saucers. $50? Really? That's enough for Mama's medicine and food, too." Ethan handed her the bills, watching as she clutched them with trembling hands. But instead of relief, he saw new worry creeping across her features. "Mister, are you sure you want Celeste? She's not really a toy anymore. She's for protecting people you love. Will you take good care of her?" The question nearly undid him. Even in her moment of desperate need, this child was concerned about the welfare of her beloved doll. "I promise you, Lila, Celeste will be treasured and protected, and maybe you could show me where you live. I'd like to make sure you get home safely." Lila nodded eagerly, carefully placing Celeste in Ethan's hands. As they walked toward her house, Ethan realized that his broken-down Bentley had been more than a mechanical failure. It had been destiny placing him exactly where he needed to be. Exactly when a little angel in a faded pink dress needed saving. He had no idea that in trying to save her, she was about to save him too. Chapter 2. The House of Broken Dreams. The journey to Lila's home transported Ethan into an alien world. He trailed her skipping figure as she danced ahead, clutching $50 like treasure, her earlier despair transformed into infectious joy about helping her mother. The stark contrast between his marble and mahogany existence and this neighborhood of weathered homes with overgrown yards humbled him profoundly. "Here we are," Lila announced, stopping before a small duplex with sun-faded yellow paint and a screen door hanging askew. The tiny yard overflowed with weeds, yet someone had attempted beauty, wilted tomatoes and struggling marigolds bordered by painted stones. Even in poverty, hope persisted. "This is it," Lila announced proudly, stopping in front of a small duplex with peeling yellow paint and a screen door hanging slightly askew on its hinges. The tiny front yard was overgrown with dandelions and crabgrass, but Ethan noticed someone had tried to create a garden. Wilted tomato plants and struggling marigolds lined a makeshift border of painted stones. Even in poverty, there had been an attempt at beauty. The porch sagged slightly under the weight of mismatched furnituria, rusted lawn chair, and a wooden crate that served as a side table. Children's chalk drawings decorated the concrete steps, faded rainbows and stick figures that spoke of happier times. Ethan's throat tightened as he imagined Lila creating these cheerful pictures while her world slowly crumbled around her. "Mama," Lila called out as she pushed open the front door, which Ethan noticed didn't have a proper lock, just a chain that dangled uselessly. "Mama, I'm home, and I brought help." The apartment's interior assaulted Ethan's senses like a physical blow. Thick, humid air carried the unmistakable cocktail of illness and desperation. Unwashed dishes, stale atmosphere, and something unidentifiable that twisted his stomach with dread. The cramped living room centered around a threadbare sofa, its original beige color now an ambiguous gray Every surface bore witness to their battle for survival. Medical bills towered in precarious stacks on a television tray masquerading as a desk. Ethan's trained eye caught glimpses of red final notice stamps and figures that would devastate any family with limited income. Empty prescription bottles lined the windowsill like fallen soldiers, while a lone pot on a hot plate contained watery soup with a few lonely vegetables floating in thin broth. But what struck him most powerfully were the signs of love that somehow survived in this place of desperation. Lila's drawings covered every inch of wall space, pictures of stick figures holding hands under impossibly blue skies, hearts and flowers, and rainbows that declared this child's determination to find beauty in darkness. Handmade paper flowers sat in a mayonnaise jar on the windowsill, and a crocheted blanket in bright yellows and oranges was draped carefully over the back of the couch. "Mama's in here," Lila whispered, leading Ethan toward a darkened bedroom. "She's been sleeping a lot lately. The fever makes her real tired." Ethan stepped into the bedroom doorway and felt his heart stop. Nora Harper lay on a twin-sized mattress on the floor, covered by a thin sheet that was soaked with perspiration. Even in sleep, her face was contorted with pain, and her breathing came in shallow, labored gasps. Her beautiful dark skin had an ashen undertone that spoke of serious illness, and her lips were cracked from dehydration. She was breathtakingly beautiful, even in her current state. Ethan could see where Lila had gotten her lovely features. The same large, expressive eyes, the same delicate bone structure, the same aura of inner strength that seemed to radiate even in unconsciousness. Nora's hair was braided back from her face, but several strands had escaped and clung to her fevered skin. "Mama," Lila whispered, kneeling beside the mattress and gently touching her mother's arm. "Mama, wake up. I sold Celeste, and now we can get your medicine." Nora's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then gradually sharpening as she tried to process her daughter's words. When her gaze fell on Ethan standing in her doorway, tall, well-dressed white man in an expensive sweater, maternal instincts kicked in with fierce intensity. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice hoarse but filled with protective fury as she struggled to sit up. "What are you doing in my home? Get away from my daughter." Ethan immediately stepped back, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "Mrs. Harper, I'm sorry for intruding. My name is Ethan Caldwell. I met Lila outside. She was trying to sell her doll to buy your medicine. I just wanted to make sure she got home safely." "You bought Celeste?" Nora's voice cracked, and Ethan saw the devastating mixture of gratitude and humiliation that crossed her features. "Oh, baby girl, you didn't have to do that. Celeste was Grandmama's gift to you." "But Mama, you need to get better," Lila insisted, crawling onto the mattress to wrap her small arms around her mother's neck. "Celeste would want to help. She's supposed to protect people we love, remember? Now we can buy your medicine and make you all better." Nora's eyes filled with tears as she held her daughter close, and Ethan watched this moment of pure love with something approaching awe. Despite her illness, despite their poverty, despite being abandoned by her husband, this woman's primary concern was still her child's sacrifice. "Sir, Mr. Caldwell," Nora began, looking at Ethan with obvious effort to focus. "Thank you for your kindness to my daughter, but I can't accept charity. If you bought her doll, that's business, but I won't have strangers thinking we're begging." The pride in her voice, even weakened by illness, commanded Ethan's respect. Here was a woman who had been stripped of nearly everything but refused to surrender her dignity. He understood that kind of pride had built his entire career on it, but seeing it in someone who had every reason to abandon such luxuries humbled him completely. "Mrs. Harper, I assure you, this isn't charity. Your daughter approached me as a businesswoman with something valuable to sell. I simply recognized the value of what she was offering." Ethan pulled Celeste from inside his jacket, where he had been carrying her carefully. In the dim light of the bedroom, the doll seemed to glow with an inner radiance, her painted eyes kind and knowing. She's an antique, isn't she? Probably worth considerably more than what I paid. Nora's hand trembled as she reached out to touch the doll's face. My mother bought her in 1987, when I was 7, the same age. Lila is now. Mama said every little girl needed an angel to watch over her, and when Lila was born, her voice broke completely. I can't believe she sold her. I can't believe I let things get so bad that my baby had to sell her most precious thing. Mama, don't cry, Lila whispered, wiping her mother's tears with gentle fingers. Celeste's going to help us. Mister. Ethan seems nice, and he promised to take good care of her. Maybe she'll watch over him too. Ethan felt something fundamental shift inside him at those innocent words. When was the last time anyone had wanted to take care of him? When had he last felt like he deserved such care? His penthouse apartment was filled with expensive art and furniture, but it had never felt like a home. His bank accounts held more money than most people could spend in several lifetimes, but he had no one to share it with. This child, in her generosity of spirit, was offering him something more valuable than anything he had ever acquired. Mrs. Harper, Ethan said carefully. I noticed the prescription on the paper Lila showed me. If I may ask, what's your diagnosis? Nora's jaw tightened. The doctors at the free clinic aren't sure. They think it might be lupus or rheumatoid arthritis, maybe both. The tests to know for certain cost more than I make in 6 months. And the medications. She gestured helplessly at the empty prescription bottles. I've been trying to stretch them, taking half doses, but it's not working anymore. Ethan's business mind immediately began calculating costs and solutions, but he forced himself to proceed carefully. This woman's pride was as real and powerful as her illness, and he couldn't afford to trample either. The medication on this prescription, I've heard it's very effective for autoimmune conditions. Have you been able to fill it? A bitter laugh escaped Nora's lips. Mr. Caldwell, that prescription costs $400 without insurance. I make $800 a month working part-time at a cleaning service when I'm well enough to work, which hasn't been often lately. After rent, utilities, and food, there's nothing left for luxuries like staying alive. The casual way she dismissed her own survival as a luxury made Ethan's hands clench into fists. How had the system failed so completely that a young mother's life was considered expendable? Mama's really smart, Lila chimed in, apparently oblivious to the adult undercurrents of the conversation. She wanted to be a nurse. But then I came along, and she had to take care of me instead. Maybe when she gets better, she can go back to school. Nora's face flushed with embarrassment. Lila, Mr. Caldwell doesn't need to hear about my old dreams. Some things just aren't meant to be. But Ethan was listening with growing fascination. A woman with medical training would understand her own condition better, would be more likely to comply with treatment, would have career prospects that could lift her family out of poverty permanently. The pieces of a larger solution were beginning to form in his mind. Mrs. Harper, if you don't mind me saying so, you have a remarkable daughter. The sacrifice she was willing to make, the love she has for you that doesn't happen by accident, that's the result of exceptional parenting. Nora's eyes filled with fresh tears. She's everything good in this world. I just wish I could give her more. I wish I could be the mother she deserves. Mama, you're the best mama in the whole world, Lila protested, snuggling closer to her mother's side. You make up songs when I'm scared, and you always make sure I eat, even when there's not much food, and you tell me stories about Grandmama and how much she loved us. That's worth more than all the money in the world. Ethan watched this exchange with growing amazement. In his world, love was conditional, strategic, something to be negotiated and leveraged. But here, in this tiny apartment that reeked of poverty and illness, he was witnessing something pure and unconditional that his billions had never been able to buy. As he prepared to leave, promising to return the next day to check on them, Ethan realized that his carefully ordered world had just been turned completely upside down. He had come here to help a sick child's mother, but he was beginning to suspect that they were going to save him instead. Chapter 3. The Weight of Abandonment. Ethan's penthouse felt like a mausoleum that night, its marble floors and crystal chandeliers mocking him with their cold perfection. Every attempt at sleep brought visions of Nora's fevered face and Lila's tear-streaked cheeks, the opulent surroundings panoramic city views. Imported furnishings worth more than most people's homes felt obscene after witnessing the Harper family's humble dignity. Dawn found him pacing his living room, Celeste clutched in trembling hands, trying to process the emotional earthquake that had demolished his carefully constructed world. By sunrise, he had made his decision. His meetings could wait. The Harper family needed him more than his shareholders did. He found Lila sitting on the front steps, braiding dandelion stems together with the intense concentration that only children could master. She looked up at his approach, her face breaking into a radiant smile that made Ethan's chest tighten with unfamiliar emotion. "Mr. Ethan," she called out, abandoning her flower chain to run toward him. "You came back. Mama said you probably wouldn't, but I knew you would. Celeste told me in my dreams." "Celeste talks to you in dreams?" Ethan asked, crouching down to her level. "Oh yes," Lila nodded seriously. "She always has. Ever since Grandmama gave her to me. Last night, she said you have a sad heart, like Mama's. But that maybe we can help fix it together." The innocent wisdom of her words hit Ethan like a physical blow. How could a 7-year-old see so clearly what he had spent decades hiding from himself? "What else did Celeste tell you?" he found himself asking. "She said you're different from other grown-ups. She said you see people's hearts instead of just their outsides. That's why you stopped to help me yesterday when everyone else just walked by." Ethan felt tears prick at his eyes. "How is your mama this morning, sweetheart?" Lila's expression grew troubled. "She's sicker. The fever got worse in the night, and she was talking to people who weren't there. I got scared and tried to wake her up, but she kept saying Daddy's name over and over. She kept asking him not to leave us." The pain in the child's voice was unbearable. Ethan felt a surge of protective rage toward the man who had abandoned these two precious souls. "Lila, can you tell me about your daddy? What happened when he left?" The little girl's shoulders sagged, and for a moment, she looked far older than her 7 years. "Daddy used to be different. He would swing me around and call me his princess, and he would dance with Mama in the kitchen while she cooked dinner. But then Mama got sick, and everything changed." She picked up a dandelion and began methodically plucking its petals. At first, Daddy tried to help. He would bring Mama soup and sit with her when she couldn't sleep. But the sicker she got, the angrier he got. He said the doctor bills were too much money, and we were going to lose our house, and why couldn't Mama just get better already? Ethan's hands clenched into fists as he listened to this child recount her father's gradual abandonment of his family's greatest need. Then, one day, Mama couldn't get out of bed at all, and Daddy had to stay home from work to take care of me. When he came home the next day, his boss had fired him for missing too much work. Daddy got so mad, he threw things and yelled at Mama like it was her fault she was sick. Lila's voice grew smaller. That's when he started saying mean things. He said Mama was weak, and that she was making us poor, and that he didn't sign up to be married to a sick person. Mama would cry after he said those things, but she tried to hide it from me. Ethan felt nauseous. What kind of monster kicked someone when they were already down? What kind of man blamed his wife for circumstances beyond her control? The night before he left, they had a really big fight. Lila continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Daddy was drinking the smelly water that makes grown-ups mean, and he told Mama she was too expensive to love. He said he could find a new wife who wouldn't cost him so much money, someone who could take care of him instead of needing to be taken care of. Mama begged him not to leave us. She promised she would get better, promised she would find a way to work more hours, promised she wouldn't need medicine anymore. But Daddy just laughed and said she was pathetic. Ethan's vision blurred with rage. He had to take several deep breaths before he could trust himself to speak. What happened the morning he left? I woke up and found Mama crying in the kitchen. Daddy had taken all the money from her purse and left a note that said he was filing for divorce. He said in the note that Mama could keep me because I was damaged goods like her, and that he was going to start fresh with someone who deserved him. The casual cruelty of Victor Harper's abandonment left Ethan speechless. To abandon a sick wife was reprehensible. To call his own daughter damaged goods was beyond forgiveness. Mama tried to pretend everything was okay, Lila continued. She said we didn't need Daddy anyway, that we were strong enough to take care of each other. But I could hear her crying at night when she thought I was asleep, and she got sicker and sicker because she couldn't afford the medicine anymore. Ethan pulled the little girl into his arms, holding her tight as she sobbed against his chest. Her small body shook with the force of emotions, too big for someone so young to carry. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. You and your mama didn't deserve any of that." "Mr. Ethan," Lila whispered against his shirt, "do you think it's my fault Daddy left? He said I was expensive too, with all my school stuff and clothes and food. Maybe if I hadn't needed so much, he would have stayed." The question shattered Ethan's heart completely. "Oh, baby girl, no. None of this is your fault. None of it. Your daddy left because there was something broken inside him, not because of anything you or your mama did. You are perfect, exactly as you are." They sat together on the steps for a long time, Ethan holding this precious child while she cried out months of accumulated pain and fear. When her tears finally subsided, she looked up at him with eyes that held too much knowledge for someone so young. "Mama still wears her wedding ring," Lila said quietly. "I asked her why, and she said it's because she promised God she would love Daddy forever, even if he stopped loving us. She says keeping promises is what makes people good, even when it hurts." The image of Nora clinging to her wedding vows, while her husband discarded their family like garbage, made Ethan's chest ache with admiration and heartbreak. How did someone maintain such integrity in the face of such betrayal? "Mr. Ethan, can I ask you something?" "Anything, sweetheart. Are you married? Do you have little girls like me?" Ethan felt the familiar pang of loneliness that he usually buried under work and material success. "No, Lila. I don't have a family. I've spent most of my life focused on work." "That sounds lonely," she said with startling insight. "Maybe that's why Celeste wanted us to meet. Maybe we can be your family, and you can be ours. Not like a daddy," she added quickly, "because Mama's still married, but like a guardian angel, the way Celeste watches over people she loves." The innocent suggestion hit Ethan with the force of revelation. He had spent years accumulating wealth and power, thinking they would fill the emptiness inside him. But sitting here with this wise little girl, he realized what he had been searching for all along. Not success, but significance. Not achievement, but connection. Not wealth, but love. "I would be honored to be your guardian angel," Ethan said solemnly, and meant it with every fiber of his being. "Really?" Lila's face lit up with pure joy. "Even though we don't have much money or a fancy house?" "Especially because of that," Ethan replied. "The most important things in life can't be bought, Lila. Love, kindness, courage. Those are the real treasures, and you and your mama are the richest people I've ever met." As they went inside to check on Nora, Ethan made a silent vow. Victor Harper had thrown away something precious, but Ethan would spend whatever it took, money, time, effort, his very soul if necessary, to protect and nurture what that fool had abandoned. He had found his purpose at last, and it was lying fevered and vulnerable in a tiny apartment, cared for by an angel in a faded pink dress, who still believed in the power of love to conquer all. Chapter 4. The Secret Guardian. Ethan's transformation struck his assistant, Clara, like lightning. After 8 years of reading his moods, the man entering through mahogany doors bore no resemblance to her calculating employer. His pristine appearance was disheveled, expensive fabric wrinkled from comforting a crying child, and his eyes held unfamiliar warmth that radiated from within. "Cancel everything this week," Ethan commanded, settling behind his desk with unprecedented urgency. "Sir, the Thompson merger is tomorrow. The board meets Friday. Everything, Clara. Something infinitely more important demands my attention." Ethan worked with empire-building intensity. But profit no longer motivated. Him love did. 4 focused hours yielded a comprehensive plan requiring every resource and connection he possessed. The first step was medical care. Ethan discovered that Dr. Sarah Lynn at Presbyterian Medical Center was considered the finest rheumatologist on the East Coast. Her waiting list was 6 months long, but a generous donation to the hospital's research fund and a carefully worded conversation about interesting cases secured an emergency consultation for a mysterious research participant within the week. Next came the delicate matter of financing. Ethan couldn't simply hand Nora a checker. Pride would never allow it. Instead, he created the fictional community wellness program, complete with official letterhead and a website that appeared to have existed for years. The program, according to its carefully crafted documentation, provided medical care to qualifying families through a combination of federal grants and private donations. Ethan smiled grimly as he forged the paperwork that would make Nora Harper eligible for this assistance. His lawyers would have heart attacks if they knew he was using his business acumen for benevolent fraud. But he had never felt more righteous about bending rules. The final challenge was more personal. How could he help without overstepping boundaries? How could he be present in their lives without seeming intrusive or inappropriate? The solution came to him as he remembered Lila's innocent suggestion about guardian angels. Over the next 3 days, Ethan became a shadow in the Harper family's life. He arranged for grocery deliveries from the local market, prepaid under the guise of a neighborhood assistance program. He had the utility company mysteriously discover overpayments on their account, crediting enough money to cover several months of bills. A computer error at the landlord's office resulted in their rent being marked as paid in full through the end of the year. Each intervention was carefully orchestrated to appear as bureaucratic good fortune rather than charity. Ethan watched from a distance as these small miracles began to ease the immediate pressure on Nora, allowing her to focus on rest and recovery rather than survival. But it was the personal moments that truly captured his heart. Every morning, he would drive past their apartment on his way to work, just to catch a glimpse of Lila playing in the yard or Nora sitting on the porch during her better moments. In the evenings, he would park across the street and watch the warm glow emanating from their small windows, imagining the love and laughter that his money could never buy. On Thursday evening, Ethan arrived to find Lila in the front yard, attempting to water the struggling garden with a rusty watering can that had more holes than metal. She spotted him immediately and ran over with her characteristic enthusiasm. "Mr. Ethan, look. The tomatoes are getting bigger. Mama says if we're real careful with the water, we might have enough for a salad next month." Ethan's throat tightened at the simple pleasure she took in such a modest prospect. In his world, people flew to Paris for dinner on a whim, but this precious child was excited about the possibility of homegrown tomatoes. "How is your mama today?" he asked, noticing that the front door was propped open to let in the evening breeze. "Much better. Lila's voice broke yesterday, and she was able to eat a whole bowl of soup. And guess what? The strangest things have been happening. A truck came with groceries that someone already paid for, and the electric company called to say we had credit on our account. Mama says it's like having a guardian angel watching over us." Ethan's heart swelled with satisfaction, but he kept his expression carefully neutral. "That does sound like a miracle. Your mama must be relieved." "She is. But she's also worried. She keeps saying things like this don't just happen, and she's scared someone made a mistake and will want the money back. I told her maybe God is just taking extra good care of us because we've been through so much sadness." The innocent faith in Lila's voice made Ethan's chest ache. This child, who had experienced abandonment and poverty, still believed in divine providence and miracles. "Your mama is very wise to be careful, but sometimes good things do happen to good people. Maybe she should just accept the blessings and focus on getting well." That's what I told her. But grown-ups worry about everything. "Will you come say hi? She's been asking about you. She wanted to thank you properly for buying Celeste." Ethan followed Lila inside, marveling at the transformation that had occurred in just a few days. The oppressive smell of illness had been replaced by the scent of cleaning supplies and fresh flowers. The apartment was still modest, but it now felt like a home rather than a sick ward. Nora was sitting on the couch, looking significantly better, though still pale and thin. Her hair was neatly braided, and she wore a clean sundress that, while obviously second-hand, gave her an air of dignity that made Ethan's breath catch. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, attempting to rise before Ethan gestured for her to remain seated. "I've been hoping you'd come by. I wanted to thank you again for your kindness to Lila, and for—" She hesitated, clearly struggling with the words. "For treating us with such respect. Not many people in your position would have bothered with a little girl selling a doll on the street." Ethan settled into the rickety chair across from her, struck again by her natural grace despite their circumstances. "Mrs. Harper, your daughter's love for you is remarkable. Anyone who could inspire such devotion deserves respect and more. Nora's eyes filled with tears. She's my whole world. When Victor left, I thought about giving up so many times. The pain, the medical bills, the loneliness, it felt overwhelming. But then I'd look at Lila, and I'd remember that I'm all she has left. I had to keep fighting. You're incredibly strong, Ethan said, meaning every word. What you've accomplished as a single mother while battling illness, it's extraordinary. I don't feel strong most days, Nora admitted with a rueful laugh. Half the time, I feel like I'm failing her. We're barely scraping by, and now with these mysterious blessings, the groceries, the utility credit, even a call today about some community health program that wants to provide me with specialist care. I feel like I'm living in a fairy tale that might disappear at any moment. Ethan had to work to keep his expression neutral at the mention of Dr. Lynn's office. Sometimes fairy tales are real. Mrs. Harper. Sometimes people get the help they need exactly when they need it most. But why us? Nora's voice carried a note of desperation. I've been praying for help for months, watching my baby sacrifice her most precious possession to try to save me. And suddenly everything starts falling into place right after we meet you. It can't be coincidence. Ethan felt a moment of panic. Nora was too intelligent, too perceptive to be fooled indefinitely. He needed to redirect her suspicions without lying outright. Mrs. Harper, I've learned in business that sometimes one small action can set off a chain reaction of positive events. Maybe your daughter's act of love, her willingness to sell Celeste to help you, touched the right person at the right time. Maybe word got out about your situation, and people wanted to help. Nora studied his face intently, and Ethan had the uncomfortable feeling that she could see straight through his carefully constructed explanations. You're not just a businessman, are you, Mr. Caldwell? There's something different about you. Before Ethan could respond, Lila bounced onto the couch beside her mother, effectively interrupting the intense moment. Mama, can Mr. Ethan stay for dinner? We have real food now, chicken and vegetables and everything. Oh, honey, I'm sure Mr. Caldwell has important places to be. Actually, I'd be honored to join you for dinner, Ethan interjected, surprising himself with how much he meant it. If you're sure it's not too much trouble, Nora's smile transformed her entire face, reminding Ethan that beneath the illness and worry was a woman of remarkable beauty and warmth. No trouble at all. It's the least I can do after all your kindness. As they prepared dinner together, Lila chattering constantly while Nora moved slowly but purposefully around the small kitchen, Ethan felt something he had never experienced before. This wasn't the sterile perfection of his penthouse or the calculated networking of business dinners. This was family messy, real, and absolutely perfect in its imperfection. Mr. Ethan, Lila announced as they sat down to eat. Mama used to want to be a nurse. She's really smart about medical stuff. Maybe when she gets all better, she can help other sick people. Like the doctors helped her. Ethan saw Nora flush with embarrassment. Lila, that was a long time ago. I never even finished the program. Why not? Ethan asked gently. Life happened, Nora replied with a shrug. I got pregnant with Lila. Victor wanted me to focus on being a wife and mother, and then money got tight. Dreams are luxuries I couldn't afford. Dreams aren't luxuries, Ethan said firmly. They're necessities. Without dreams, we're just surviving instead of living. Easy to say when you have the resources to pursue them, Nora replied, but without bitterness. Some of us have to choose between dreams and reality. What if reality could be changed? Ethan asked carefully. What if circumstances were different? Nora looked at him with that penetrating gaze again. Mr. Caldwell, are you asking hypothetically, or is there something you're not telling me? Ethan felt exposed under her scrutiny, but before he could formulate an answer, a loud crash of thunder shook the building. Rain began pelting the windows with sudden intensity, and the lights flickered ominously. Oh no, Nora said, looking worried. The electricity goes out every time we have a bad storm. The wiring in this building is ancient. As if summoned by her words, the apartment plunged into darkness. Lila immediately moved closer to her mother, and Ethan felt a powerful protective instinct surge through him. In the darkness, with rain lashing the windows and thunder rumbling overhead, the three of them seemed isolated from the rest of the world. "It's okay, baby," Nora soothed, pulling Lila close. "We'll light some candles and wait it out." Ethan listened to her calm reassurance of her frightened daughter and felt something profound shift inside him. This woman, who had every reason to be bitter and broken, was still capable of providing comfort and security to her child. She was still fighting, still hoping, still believing that tomorrow could be better than today. In that moment, sitting in the darkness with Nora's gentle voice washing over them and Lila's small hand finding his in the blackness, Ethan made a decision that would change all their lives forever. He was going to stop hiding in the shadows, stop orchestrating help from a distance. These two extraordinary people had shown him what real wealth looked like, and he wanted to be part of it not as a benefactor or savior, but as family. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm of emotion building in Ethan's heart. Tomorrow, he would tell them the truth about the miraculous help they'd been receiving. Tomorrow, he would risk everything by revealing his growing feelings for Nora and his love for Lila. Tonight, he would simply sit in the darkness with the two people who had brought light back into his world and let himself imagine what it would feel like to truly belong somewhere at last. Chapter 5. The mask falls away. The storm had raged through the night, yet Ethan barely noticed. He'd fallen asleep on the Harper family's worn couch, with Lila curled against him like a trusting kitten, while Nora rested peacefully in the nearby armchair. For the first time in years, Ethan's dreams contained laughter and homemade meals instead of spreadsheets and board meetings. The feeling of being genuinely needed rather than merely successful. Lila's panicked voice shattered the morning tranquility. "Mama, Mama, wake up. I can't wake her, mister." "Ethan." Ethan's eyes snapped open to find Lila frantically shaking her mother's shoulder. Nora slumped in the chair, breathing shallow and labored, her skin an alarming ashen gray. Even from across the room, Ethan recognized serious medical distress. "Lila, step back, sweetheart," Ethan commanded, his voice calm despite the terror coursing through his veins. He knelt beside Nora and pressed his fingers to her wrist, finding her pulse rapid and thready. Her forehead was burning with fever again, worse than before. "What's wrong with her?" Lila whispered, tears streaming down her face. "She was better yesterday. She was laughing and making dinner and everything." Ethan's mind raced through possibilities. Autoimmune flares could be unpredictable, triggered by stress, infection, or sometimes nothing at all. Whatever was happening, Nora needed immediate medical attention, the kind that the free clinic couldn't provide. "Lila, I need you to be very brave right now," Ethan said, lifting Nora carefully in his arms. Her body felt frighteningly light, as if the illness was consuming her from within. "We're going to take your mama to the hospital, and they're going to make her better. Can you grab her purse and your jacket?" "Is she going to die?" Lila asked, her voice small and terrified. Ethan looked into those trusting brown eyes and made a promise he prayed he could keep. "No, baby girl, I won't let that happen. Your mama is going to be fine." The drive to Presbyterian Medical Center was the longest 20 minutes of Ethan's life. Nora drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally murmuring incoherent words that made Lila cry harder. Ethan drove with one hand while holding Lila's small fingers with the other, offering what comfort he could while his own heart hammered with fear. At the emergency room, Ethan's wealth and connections finally proved their worth. While other patients waited in the crowded lobby, Nora was immediately taken to a private room, where Dr. Lynn, whom Ethan had called during the drive, was already waiting with a team of specialists. "Mr. Caldwell, doctor," Lynn said as they transferred Nora to the hospital bed. "I'll need to run extensive tests, but from what you've described, this appears to be a severe autoimmune crisis. Her body is essentially attacking itself. We need to get her stabilized immediately." Ethan watched helplessly as the medical team swarmed around Nora, inserting IVs, drawing blood, connecting monitors that beeped ominously. Lila clung to his hand, her small body trembling with fear as she watched her mother disappear behind a forest of medical equipment. "Mr. Ethan," she whispered, "how did you know to bring Mama here? And why is that doctor acting like she knows you?" Ethan's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. In his panic to save Nora, He had forgotten to maintain the pretense of being a casual acquaintance. Doctor. Lynn's familiarity, the immediate VIP treatment, the private roomit, all pointed to a level of involvement that couldn't be explained away as coincidence. Before he could formulate an answer, Dr. Lynn approached them with a grim expression. Mr. Caldwell, I need to speak with you privately about Mrs. Harper's condition. No, Lila said firmly, surprising both adults with her vehemence. If it's about Mama, I need to hear it too. I'm not a baby, and she's my mama. I have a right to know. Ethan looked down at this fierce little girl and felt his heart break with admiration. Despite her fear, she was advocating for herself and her mother with a strength that many adults never possessed. Doctor. Lynn, Lila is right. She's been taking care of her mother for months. She deserves to know the truth. Doctor. Lynn knelt to Lila's eye level, her expression gentle but serious. Sweetheart, your mama is very sick. Her immune system is confused and attacking healthy parts of her body. Without proper treatment, she could become much sicker. But the good news is that we have medicines that can help her get better. What kind of medicines? Lila asked, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. Strong medicines that will calm down her immune system and help her body heal. But they're expensive. And she'll need them for a long time. Ethan watched Lila's face crumble as she processed this information. 7-year-old being forced to confront the reality of chronic illness and financial limitations that most adults couldn't handle. How expensive, Lila whispered. Doctor. Lynn glanced at Ethan uncertainly. The treatment protocol will cost approximately $15,000 initially, then about $3,000 per month for maintenance therapy. The numbers hit Ethan like physical blows, not because of their magnitude he spent more on wine in a year, but because of what they represented to this family. Without intervention, these costs would destroy any hope Nora had of recovery or stability. But Mama doesn't have that kind of money, Lila said, her voice breaking. We can barely afford food. Does that mean she's going to die? No, Ethan said firmly, his decision crystallizing with perfect clarity. Your mama is not going to die. She's going to get every treatment she needs, and she's going to get better. Doctor. Lynn looked at him questioningly. Mr. Caldwell, Mrs. Harper's insurance. We'll cover everything, Ethan interrupted. I'll make sure of it. How? Lila asked, looking up at him with desperate hope. How can you make sure? Ethan knelt down to face her, knowing that the next words would change everything between them. Lila. Remember when you asked me if I had a family, and I said no? That was true. But it wasn't the whole truth. I have a lot of money, more money than most people ever see, and I want to use that money to help your mama get better. Lila's eyes widened. You mean, like a millionaire? Something like that, Ethan said gently, and I've been using that money to help your family already. The groceries that appeared at your door, the credit on your utility bills, this hospital appointment that was all me. The confession hung in the air between them. Ethan watched a dozen emotions flicker across Lila's face. Confusion, understanding, gratitude, and something else he couldn't quite identify. You're our guardian angel, she breathed finally. Celeste told me you were sad and needed us to help fix your heart. But she didn't tell me you were rich. Why didn't you tell us before? Because I was afraid, Ethan admitted. I was afraid your mama would be too proud to accept help, and I was afraid you might think I was trying to buy your love. That's silly, Lila said matter-of-factly. Love can't be bought. If it could, Daddy would have loved us enough to stay when things got hard. The simple wisdom of her words hit Ethan like a revelation. This child understood something that had taken him 38 years to learn, that authentic connection couldn't be purchased, only earned through genuine care and commitment. Lila, I need you to know that helping your mama isn't about money for me. It's about love. I love you, and I'm falling in love with your mama not because I want to buy your affection, but because you two have shown me what real family looks like. Lila studied his face with the intense scrutiny that only children could manage. Do you promise you won't leave us when things get scary or hard? Because Mama's been hurt enough, and I don't think her heart could break again. I promise, Ethan said solemnly. I'm not going anywhere. Your mama is going to get the best medical care available, and you're both going to be safe and cared for, not because I'm rich, but because I love you both more than anything else in the world." Lila threw her arms around his neck, holding him tight. "I love you too, mister. Ethan, and I know Mama does, even if she's too scared to say it yet." As they sat together in the hospital waiting room, watching monitors track Nora's vital signs while powerful medications began their healing work, Ethan realized that his carefully ordered world had been completely transformed. He had started this journey thinking he was rescuing a desperate family. But the truth was far more complex. Nora and Lila hadn't needed rescuing. They had needed partnership, support, and someone who recognized their inherent worth. In return, they had rescued him from a life of isolation and meaningless accumulation. They had shown him that true wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts, but in the depth of love shared between people who chose to become family. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Nora would need time to process his deception, however well-intentioned. There would be difficult conversations about pride, independence, and the complex dynamics of a relationship built on such unequal financial footing. But as Ethan watched Lila fall asleep with her head on his shoulder, her small hand still clutching his, he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. For the first time in his life, Ethan Caldwell had found something worth more than all his money. A family worth fighting for, protecting, and loving with everything he had to give. Chapter 6. The Healing of Hearts. 3 weeks later, sunlight streamed through their apartment windows, illuminating medical textbooks Ethan had discreetly provided for Nora. Her transformation bordered on miraculous. Doctor. Lynn's treatment hadn't merely halted the autoimmune assault, but actively reversed previous damage. Color bloomed in Nora's cheeks, energy returned to her movements, and for the first time in months, she dared envision a future beyond mere survival. Yet the most profound change wasn't physical, it was the cautious hope flowering in her heart as she observed Ethan with Lila. Each afternoon brought his arrival, expensive tie loosened, settling cross-legged on their threadbare carpet to assist with homework or absorb Lila's elaborate daily chronicles. His evolution from polished executive to devoted father figure seemed so natural that Nora occasionally forgot he'd once been a stranger. "Mama, look what Mr. Ethan taught me," Lila called out, rushing through the front door with her backpack bouncing behind her. Ethan followed, carrying a bag of groceries and wearing the slightly disheveled look that had become his signature since entering their lives. "She's mastered long division," Ethan announced proudly, ruffling Lila's hair. "Your daughter is brilliant, Nora. She grasped concepts that take most kids weeks to understand." Nora felt her chest warm with maternal pride and something deeper gratitude for this man who saw her daughter's potential and nurtured it with genuine enthusiasm. "Show me, baby girl." As Lila spread her homework across the coffee table, Ethan settled beside Nora on the couch, close enough that she could smell his cologne, mixed with the faint scent of chalk from Lila's classroom. The casual intimacy of the moment, the three of them huddled together over math problems like any normal family made Nora's pulse quicken with possibilities. She wasn't quite ready to acknowledge. "How was your doctor's appointment?" Ethan asked quietly, his fingers brushing hers as he reached for Lila's pencil. "Doctor, Lynn is amazed by my progress," Nora replied, trying to ignore the warmth spreading from where their hands had touched. "She said if I continue improving at this rate, I might be able to start thinking about." She paused, afraid to voice the dream that had been growing stronger each day. "About what?" Ethan prompted gently. "About going back to school, finishing my nursing program." The words came out in a rush, as if speaking them too slowly might make them disappear. "I know it sounds crazy, considering everything, but Lynn thinks I could handle the physical demands now, and there are programs for single mothers." "It doesn't sound crazy at all," Ethan interrupted, his voice filled with conviction. "It sounds like exactly what you should be doing. You have natural healing instincts, Nora. I've watched you care for Lila, seen how you interact with the other patients in Dr. Lynn's waiting room. You were meant to be a nurse." Nora felt tears prick her eyes. When was the last time someone had believed in her dreams with such certainty? Victor had always dismissed her ambitions as impractical fantasies, but Ethan spoke as if her success was inevitable rather than impossible. "But the cost," she began, falling back into the practical concerns that had governed her life for so long. Even with financial aid, there would be books, supplies, childcare for Lila. "Let me worry about that," Ethan said firmly. "I told you before, I'm not going anywhere. Whatever you need to succeed, we'll figure it out together." The word together hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that made Nora's heart race. Over the past 3 weeks, Ethan had become integral to their daily routine, but they had carefully avoided defining what was happening between them. He was generous with his affection for Lila and his support for Nora's recovery, but he had never presumed anything beyond friendship. "Mr. Ethan," Lila piped up from her position on the floor, "will you teach me how to braid hair like you did yesterday? I want to do Mama's hair all fancy." "I think your Mama's hair is perfect just the way it is," Ethan replied, but his eyes met Nora's with an intensity that made her breath catch. "But if she wants fancy braids, I'd be honored to help." 20 minutes later, Nora found herself sitting cross-legged on the floor with Ethan behind her, his gentle fingers working through her hair, while Lila offered helpful commentary. The intimacy of the moment was overwhelming. She couldn't remember the last time someone had touched her with such tenderness, such care. "You have beautiful hair," Ethan murmured, his voice barely audible over Lila's chatter. "Everything about you is beautiful." Nora's eyes fluttered closed as his fingers grazed the nape of her neck. The compliment, delivered with such quiet sincerity, undid something inside her that had been carefully guarded since Victor's abandonment. She had forgotten what it felt like to be cherished, to be seen as desirable rather than burdensome. "Ethan," she whispered, turning to face him. Their faces were inches apart, and she could see golden flecks in his green eyes, could feel his breath warm against her cheek. "Mama, you look like a princess," Lila exclaimed, clapping her hands together. "Mr. Ethan, you're really good at making people beautiful." The moment was broken, but the electricity between them lingered. As they helped Lila with her evening routine, Ethan had seamlessly integrated himself into their bedtime ritual, reading stories, checking for monsters under the bed, and listening to Lila's prayers with the solemnity of someone who understood their importance. "Dear God," Lila whispered as Ethan and Nora stood in her doorway, "thank you for making Mama healthy again, and thank you for sending Mr. Ethan to be our guardian angel. Please help him not to be lonely anymore, and help Mama see that it's okay to love him back. Amen." Nora's cheeks burned with embarrassment at her daughter's perceptive prayer, but when she glanced at Ethan, she saw only tenderness in his expression. "She's very wise," he said softly as they moved to the living room. Sometimes children see things that adults are too afraid to acknowledge. They settled on the couch together, the evening stretching before them with unprecedented possibility. For weeks, their conversations had focused on practical matters, medical appointments, Lila's schooling, daily logistics. Tonight felt different, charged with the potential for deeper intimacy. "Ethan," Nora began, her voice trembling slightly, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Anything," he replied, turning to face her fully. "Why us? I understand wanting to help when you met Lila on that first day she was a child in distress, and you have a good heart. But this level of involvement, the way you've woven yourself into our lives, what do you get out of it?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing patterns on the couch cushion between them. "When I first saw Lila selling her doll, I thought I was witnessing a tragedy, a child forced to sacrifice something precious for adult failures. But as I got to know you both, I realized I was actually witnessing something miraculous." He looked up, meeting her eyes with raw honesty. "Nora, you and Lila have something I've spent my entire life trying to buy. Genuine love, the kind that survives hardship and grows stronger under pressure. Being part of your family, even in this limited way, has given my life meaning that all my money never could." "But what happens when the novelty wears off?" Nora asked, voicing her deepest fear. "When helping us becomes inconvenient or complicated. Victor loved me once too, but when things got difficult, that love disappeared." Ethan reached for her hands, cradling them gently in his own. "Victor was a fool who didn't recognize treasure when he held it. I'm not Victor, Nora. I don't run from difficulty. I've built my entire career on solving complex problems. The difference is that this isn't a problem to be solved, This is a family to be cherished. Ethan, Nora breathed, but he continued before she could formulate her concerns. I know this is complicated. I know the financial disparity between us creates uncomfortable dynamics. I know you're still technically married to a man who abandoned you. But I also know that what I feel for you and Lila isn't going away. I'm in love with you, Nora, not because I want to rescue you, but because you've rescued me. The confession hung between them, beautiful and terrifying. In its vulnerability, Nora studied Ethan's face, searching for any sign of the casual insincerity she had learned to expect from men. Instead, she found only patient hope and unwavering devotion. I'm scared, she admitted finally. I'm scared of depending on someone who might leave. I'm scared of Lila getting too attached and being hurt again. I'm scared that once you really know me, my flaws and weaknesses and baggage, you'll realize I'm not worth the effort. Ethan cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away tears she hadn't realized were falling. Nora Harper, you are worth everything. Your strength in the face of adversity, your grace under pressure, the way you've raised Lila to be compassionate and hopeful despite everything you've both endured, you're the most remarkable woman I've ever known. When he leaned forward to kiss her, Nora didn't pull away. The kiss was gentle, reverent, filled with months of accumulated longing and the promise of healing. It tasted like hope and possibility, like the first warm day after a brutal winter. When they finally broke apart, Nora rested her forehead against Ethan's, breathing in his presence and allowing herself to believe, for the first time since Victor's betrayal, that maybe she deserved to be loved completely and unconditionally. This won't be easy, she whispered against his lips. The best things never are, Ethan replied, pulling her closer. But we'll figure it out together, all three of us. As they sat wrapped in each other's arms, planning a future that had seemed impossible just weeks before, Nora felt the last of her defensive walls crumble. Ethan had proven his devotion not through grand gestures but through consistent presence, patient love, and unwavering commitment to both her and Lila. For the first time in years, Nora allowed herself to dream not just of survival, but of happiness, the kind that came from being truly known, deeply loved, and completely cherished by someone who would never leave. Chapter 7. The Return of Darkness. 2 months into Nora's miraculous recovery, a single aggressive knock obliterated their carefully constructed paradise. Ethan stood in the kitchen, guiding Lila through his grandmother's secret pancake recipe, while Nora organized nursing school applications at the dining table. Their cherished Saturday morning ritual shattered like glass under the violent pounding that froze all three in place. Nora, open this door immediately. I know you're hiding in there. The voice hit Nora like a physical assault, instantly transforming her from a confident woman, preparing for new beginnings into the terrified, abandoned wife she'd fought so hard to leave behind. 6 months hadn't diminished Victor Harper's power to reduce her to trembling fear with just his tone. Mama, Lila whispered, moving instinctively toward Ethan, who had positioned himself protectively between the child and the door. Is that? Yes, baby, Nora replied, her voice barely steady. That's your father. Ethan's jaw tightened as he processed the implications. Victor's timing couldn't be coincidental. Nora's health had improved dramatically. She was preparing to return to school, and there were clear signs of financial stability in their home. The man who had abandoned his family in their darkest hour had returned now that their prospects were brightening. Nora. Victor's voice grew more aggressive. I can hear you in there. Open this door, or I'll kick it down. I've got rights. You gave up your rights when you walked out on us. Nora called back, but Ethan could hear the tremor in her voice. 6 months of healing couldn't erase years of psychological manipulation and abandonment. Like hell I did. She's still my daughter, and you're still my wife. Now open this damn door. Ethan moved toward the door, his protective instincts overriding everything else, but Nora caught his arm. No, she whispered urgently. If he sees you here, it'll make everything worse. He'll use it against me in court. Court? Ethan's blood ran cold. Nora, what are you talking about? Before she could answer, the sound of a key turning in the lock made them all step back in alarm. Victor Harper entered their sanctuary like a predator claiming territory, his presence immediately poisoning the atmosphere they had worked so hard to create. He was exactly what Ethan had expected. Tall, conventionally handsome in a rough way, with the swagger of a man who believed the world owed him something. But there was something desperate about his eyes, something that suggested his life since leaving Nora hadn't gone according to plan. Victor's gaze swept the apartment, taking in the new furniture, the well-stocked kitchen, Lila's new clothes, and finally landing on Ethan with undisguised hostility. Well, looks like my wife didn't waste any time finding herself a sugar daddy. Victor, please, Nora began, moving protectively toward Lila. Don't do this in front of her. Don't do what? Come back to claim what's mine. Victor's voice was deliberately loud, designed to intimidate. I've been watching this place, Nora. Fancy cars in the driveway, grocery deliveries. This white boy coming and going like he owns the place. You think I'm stupid? Ethan forced himself to remain calm, recognizing the dangerous dynamics at play. This man was a bully, someone who used aggression and intimidation to control others. Responding with equal aggression would only escalate the situation and potentially put Nora and Lila at risk. Mr. Harper, Ethan said evenly. I'm Ethan Caldwell. I'm a friend of your family's. Victor laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. Friend? That's what we're calling it? You move in on my wife while I'm gone, turn her against me, and you think that makes you a friend? You weren't gone, Lila said suddenly, her young voice cutting through the adult tension with startling clarity. You left us. You said Mama was too expensive to love, and you called me damaged goods. Friends don't say things like that. Victor's face darkened as he looked at his daughter, really looked at her for the first time since entering. The healthy glow in her cheeks, the confidence in her posture, the way she instinctively moved closer to Ethan rather than him. His own child preferred a stranger to her biological father, and the realization clearly enraged him. Don't you talk back to me, little girl. I'm your father, and you'll show me respect. Respect is earned, Lila replied with devastating simplicity. Mister, Ethan says people who love you don't leave when things get hard. They stay and help fix what's broken. The wisdom in her words clearly stung Victor, who turned his fury back toward Nora. This is what you're teaching her? To disrespect her own father? To choose some rich stranger over her own blood? I'm teaching her that love is about actions, not words, Nora replied, finding her strength as she watched Victor tower over their daughter. I'm teaching her that people who truly care about you don't abandon you when you need them most. I came back, didn't I? Victor's voice took on a wheedling tone that made Ethan's skin crawl. You made mistakes, baby. I was scared and overwhelmed, and I handled things wrong. But I'm here now, ready to be the husband and father you both deserve. Ethan watched Nora's face carefully, recognizing the internal battle being waged. Part of Hertha, part that had loved this man once, that had promised before God to love him in sickness and health, wanted to believe in the possibility of redemption. But the stronger part, the part that had been forged in the fire of abandonment and single motherhood, knew better. Where were you when I was lying on that mattress, burning with fever and unable to afford medicine? Nora asked quietly. Where were you when Lila was selling her most precious possession to try to save my life? Where were you during the hospital stays, the frightening diagnosis, the nights when I thought I might die and leave her completely alone? Victor shifted uncomfortably, clearly unprepared for this direct confrontation. I was figuring things out, getting my life together, so I could come back and provide for you properly. Shacking up with that woman from your office? Nora's voice was still now. Yes, Victor, I know about Samantha. The neighbors saw you with her. So don't stand in my home and lie to my face about getting your life together. Ethan felt a surge of admiration for Nora's strength, but also growing concern about Victor's increasingly agitated state. The man was clearly not getting the reception he had expected, and cornered bullies were often the most dangerous. That's over, Victor said dismissively. Samantha was just a distraction. You're my wife, Nora. We took vows for better or worse, in sickness and health. You can't just throw that away because things got difficult. I didn't throw anything away, Nora replied, her voice rising with righteous anger. You did. You threw away our marriage, our family, and your daughter's trust. You don't get to waltz back in here and pretend none of that happened. Victor's facade of contrition began to crack. Fine, You want to play hardball? I've already filed papers with the court. I'm seeking joint custody of Lila and spousal support. I've got rights, Nora, and I'm going to exercise them. The threat hit the room like a bomb. Ethan saw Lila's face crumple with fear, saw Nora's hard-won confidence begin to waver. This was Victor's real strategy. Legal intimidation, using the system to regain control over the family he had discarded. On what grounds? Ethan asked, his lawyer's instincts kicking in despite his emotional investment. Victor turned his attention back to Ethan, his eyes gleaming with malicious satisfaction. Oh, I've got plenty of grounds. An unstable mother with a chronic illness, living with a man she's not married to, accepting financial support from said man in exchange for God knows what. Any family court judge will see this situation for what it really is. And what is it, Victor? Nora asked, stepping forward with dangerous calm. Prostitution with extra steps, Victor replied brutally. You're trading your body for his money, just like any other, except you're doing it in front of our daughter. The words hung in the air like poison. Ethan felt rage unlike anything he had ever experienced coursing through his veins, but before he could respond, Lila spoke up with devastating innocence. What's prostitution, Mama? The question shattered something in Nora. Ethan watched her crumble under the weight of Victor's cruelty, saw her retreat into the shell of fear and shame that months of healing had tried to repair. This was Victor's real weapon, not just legal threats, but psychological warfare designed to destroy her self-worth. Get out, Ethan said quietly, his voice carrying more menace than any shout could have conveyed. Get out of this house right now. Victor laughed. Or what? You'll call the police? I haven't broken any laws. I'm visiting my wife and daughter in what's still legally my residence, too. Actually, you have broken laws, Ethan replied, his business mind now working with cold precision. Abandonment of family, failure to pay child support, entering a residence without permission. And if you think I won't use every resource at my disposal to protect this family, you're about to learn how wrong you can be. Something in Ethan's tone must have penetrated Victor's bravado, because his cocky expression faltered slightly. Who the hell are you, really? I'm someone who loves them more than you ever did, Ethan replied simply. And I'm someone with the means to fight you in court until you're nothing but a bad memory. Victor's face flushed with anger, but Ethan could see calculation behind his eyes. He was clearly reassessing the situation, realizing that his intimidation tactics weren't working as planned. This isn't over, Victor said, backing toward the door. Not by a long shot. I'll see you in court, Nora, and when I do, I'm going to prove that you're an unfit mother who sold herself to the highest bidder. We'll see how much your rich boyfriend's money matters then. As the door slammed behind him, the apartment fell into stunned silence. Lila was crying quietly, overwhelmed by emotions she couldn't understand. Nora stood frozen in the middle of the room, looking as fragile as she had during her worst illness. Ethan wanted to gather them both in his arms, to promise that everything would be okay, that he would protect them from Victor's threats. But he could see in Nora's eyes that something fundamental had shifted. The doubt that Victor had planted was already taking root, and Ethan realized that their hardest battle was just beginning. The man who had abandoned them in their darkest hour had returned to destroy the happiness they had built in the light, and Ethan knew that all his money and power might not be enough to heal the damage that 20 minutes of psychological warfare had inflicted. Chapter 8. Standing in the Storm. The days following Victor's explosive return passed in a suffocating haze of legal consultations, court filings, and sleepless nights that stretched endlessly. Ethan had immediately retained Sofia Rivera, the city's most formidable family law attorney. Yet even her confidence couldn't dispel the anxiety that had settled over their household like a toxic cloud. Nora retreated into herself. The vibrant woman planning her nursing school return was replaced by a shadow consumed with fear and self-doubt. She moved through their apartment like a ghost, haunting her former life, jumping at every unexpected sound, constantly checking locks, and barely eating despite Ethan's gentle encouragement. What if he's right? She whispered one evening as they sat in the darkened living room. Lila finally asleep after hours of nightmares about mean Daddy taking her away. What if the judge sees what we have together and decides I'm exactly what Victor says I am? Ethan pulled her closer on the couch, feeling her trembling despite the warm evening air. "Nora, look at me." When she raised her haunted eyes to his, he cupped her face gently. "You are an extraordinary mother who has sacrificed everything for her daughter. You are a woman of integrity who has rebuilt her life from nothing. What we have together is beautiful and real, not shameful. But the money, ethanol, the help you've given us, how do I explain that without it sounding like—" She couldn't finish the sentence, but Ethan understood. "Like what Victor accused you of." Ethan's voice hardened with anger, not at her, but at the man who had planted these poisonous seeds of doubt. "Nora, I've seen prostitution in my business dealing. I've seen relationships built on transaction and mutual exploitation. What we have is the opposite of that. We have love, partnership, and mutual respect." Meanwhile, Lila struggled with her own confusion and fear. The confident little girl who had once sold her doll to save her mother now clung to both Ethan and Nora with desperate intensity, terrified that expressing her feelings might somehow give Victor ammunition against them. "Daddy Ethan," she whispered one night when Ethan came to comfort her after another nightmare, "what if the judge makes me go live with him? What if I never see you and Mama again?" Ethan's heart shattered at the terror in her voice. This child, who had already endured abandonment and poverty, was now facing the possibility of being torn from the only stability she had ever known. "Baby girl, I promise you, I will never let that happen. We're going to fight for our family with everything we have." But even as he made the promise, Ethan felt the weight of uncertainty. Family courts were unpredictable, and Victor's lawyer was skilled at manipulating perceptions. They had already filed motions painting Ethan as a wealthy predator who had taken advantage of a vulnerable woman, suggesting that Nora was an unfit mother who prioritized her relationship over her daughter's welfare. The preliminary hearing arrived like an executioner's appointment. Ethan, Nora, and Lila sat in the courthouse waiting room, a portrait of quiet dignity despite their internal turmoil. Victor arrived with his attorney, projecting reformed respectability that made Ethan's skin crawl. New haircut, expensive suit, and practiced expressions of paternal concern, all carefully calculated to hide his true nature. Judge Eleanor Thompson called the session to order, her stern expression revealing nothing of her thoughts as she reviewed the initial filings. "This is a preliminary hearing to determine temporary custody arrangements while we prepare for the full proceeding. Mr. Harper, you're seeking joint custody and spousal support from a woman you abandoned 6 months ago." Victor's lawyer stood smoothly. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges past mistakes but has undergone counseling and is prepared to resume his responsibilities as a father. We're concerned about the current living situation, with Mrs. Harper cohabitating with a man she's known for less than a year." Ethan watched Nora flinch at the formal language that made their love sound sordid and calculating. Judge Thompson turned her penetrating gaze to their table. "Mrs. Harper, how do you respond to these allegations?" Nora stood, on trembling legs, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "Your Honor, Mr. Harper left us when I became ill and couldn't contribute financially to our household. He provided no support, made no contact with our daughter, and began a relationship with another woman while we struggled for survival. Mr. Caldwell has been a stabilizing presence in our lives, helping us through the worst crisis we've ever faced. And the nature of your relationship with Mr. Caldwell?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Ethan saw Victor smirk, confident that this line of inquiry would destroy them, but Nora raised her chin with quiet pride. "Mr. Caldwell is the most honorable man I've ever known, Your Honor. He has shown my daughter what a father should be, present, supportive, and unwavering in his commitment to our welfare. Our relationship is built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine love." Judge Thompson made notes, her expression unreadable. "I'm ordering a psychological evaluation for all parties and a home study to assess the current living situation. Temporary custody remains with Mrs. Harper, with supervised visitation for Mr. Harper. We'll reconvene in 30 days for the full hearing." As they left the courthouse, Ethan felt the weight of impending battle. Victor had fired the first shots, but the war for their family's future was just beginning. That night, as he held Nora while she cried herself to sleep, Ethan made silent vows. He would use every resource, every connection, every ounce of his influence to protect the two people who had given his life meaning. But in the darkness, listening to Lila's restless sleep through the thin walls, Ethan couldn't shake the fear that even his billions might not be enough to overcome a system that sometimes failed the very people it was meant to protect. The storm Victor had brought to their doorstep was far from over, and Ethan could only pray that their love would prove stronger than the forces trying to tear them apart. The real battle was yet to come, and everything they had built together hung in the balance. Chapter 9. The Price of Love. The month between hearings felt like a lifetime suspended in purgatory. Dr. Emily Carter, the court-appointed psychologist, conducted extensive interviews with all parties. Her probing questions designed to uncover the truth beneath carefully constructed facades. Ethan endured hours of evaluation, discussing his motivations, his relationship with Nora, and his commitment to Lila. Mr. Caldwell. Dr. Carter had asked during one particularly intense session, some might argue that your involvement with this family represents a rescue fantasy rather than genuine love. How do you distinguish between the two? Ethan had considered the question carefully before responding. Doctor, I've been successful in business because I can distinguish between sound investments and emotional impulses. What I feel for Nora and Lila isn't about rescuing them, it's about being rescued by them. They've shown me what real wealth looks like, and it has nothing to do with money. Meanwhile, the home study conducted by social worker Laura Bennett proved another ordeal. She examined every aspect of their living situation, interviewed neighbors, reviewed school records, and observed family interactions with clinical detachment. This is a beautiful home, Bennett noted during her visit, taking in the spacious rooms, well-stocked kitchen, and Lila's cheerfully decorated bedroom. But I'm concerned about the speed with which these changes occurred. 6 months ago, you were facing eviction. Mrs. Harper. Now you're living in circumstances far beyond your means. How do you explain this transformation? Nora's answer was simple and direct. Love changed everything, Miss Bennett. Not just romantic love, but the love of someone who saw value in us when we couldn't see it in ourselves. Ethan didn't rescue. Ush partnered with us to build something beautiful. But Victor wasn't content to wait for official proceedings. He began a campaign of psychological warfare designed to undermine their confidence and stability. Anonymous calls at all hours, false reports to Child Protective Services claiming neglect, and constant surveillance that made them feel hunted in their own home. The breaking point came when Lila's teacher, Mrs. Coleman, called with concerns about the child's behavior at school. Lila seems anxious and distracted, she explained to Nora over the phone. She's been asking questions about divorce and custody that are far too mature for a child her age. She's also been very protective of a photograph she carries. I believe it's of you and Mr. Caldwell. That evening, Ethan found Lila sitting in her bedroom, staring at the family photo they'd taken at the park just weeks before, back when their future seemed certain and bright. Hey, princess, Ethan said softly, settling beside her on the bed. Mrs. Coleman called. She's worried about you. Lila's eyes filled with tears she'd been trying so hard to hold back. Daddy Ethan, what if they make me go live with him? He was mean to Mama, and he left us when we needed him most. I don't want to be his little girl. I want to be yours. Ethan pulled her close, his own eyes burning with unshed tears. Lila, listen to me very carefully. No matter what happens in that courtroom, you will always be my daughter, not because of papers or legal decisions, but because of love. Love doesn't disappear just because a judge makes a ruling. But what if? No what ifs, Ethan interrupted gently. We're going to fight for our family with everything we have. Your mama is the strongest woman I know, and you're the bravest little girl in the world. Together, we can face anything. As the final hearing approached, Ethan made a decision that terrified him more than any business deal ever had. He scheduled a meeting with Victor alone. They met at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown, where Ethan could control the environment. Victor arrived with his typical swagger, but Ethan could see desperation beneath the bravado. So, the rich boy wants to negotiate, Victor sneered, settling into the chair across from Ethan. What's your offer? How much to make me disappear? Ethan studied the man who had caused so much pain to the people he loved most. This isn't about money, Victor. This is about what's best for Lila. Don't pretend you care about her, Victor shot back. This is about you playing house with my wife and buying yourself a ready-made family. How much did it cost you to win their affection? Their affection can't be bought, Ethan replied calmly. But apparently, yours can be sold. You walked away from a daughter who loved you unconditionally and a wife who was devoted to you for what? Freedom? Another woman? The chance to avoid responsibility? Victor's facade cracked slightly. You don't know anything about my situation. Marriage is hard. Kids are expensive, and sick wives are what? Ethan's voice turned deadly quiet. Inconvenient? Expensive? Too much trouble? Let me tell you what sick wives actually are, Victor. They're human beings deserving of love and support. They're partners who need you most when they're at their weakest. They're the mothers of your children who deserve your protection and care. Save the sermon, Victor snarled, but Ethan could see his words hitting their mark. Here's what's going to happen, Ethan continued, leaning forward. You're going to drop this custody suit and stay out of their lives. In return, I'll set up an education fund for Lila that you can't touch, and I'll make sure she knows where she came from without hearing about what a coward her biological father was. And if I refuse? Ethan's smile was arctic. Then I'll destroy you, Victor. I'll expose every detail of your abandonment, your affair, your complete failure as a husband and father. I'll make sure every employer, every woman, every person in your social circle knows exactly who you are. You think you have rights? Rights come with responsibilities. And you abandoned yours. Victor's bravado finally crumbled completely. You think your money makes you better than me? No, Ethan replied quietly. My actions make me better than you. The fact that I stayed when things got difficult while you ran away, that's what makes me better. The fact that I see Nora and Lila as treasures to be cherished while you saw them as burdens to be discarded, that's what makes me better. The meeting ended with Victor's hollow threats and Ethan's quiet confidence. But as he drove home to his family, Ethan realized that the real battle wouldn't be won in boardrooms or coffee shops. It would be won in that courtroom, where a judge would decide whether love conquered abandonment, whether commitment trumped genetics, whether the family they had built together would be allowed to survive. The final hearing was just days away, and Ethan had never felt more certain that he was fighting for everything that mattered in the world. Chapter 10. The Victory of Love. The morning of the final custody hearing dawned gray and somber, matching the anxiety that had consumed their household for weeks. Ethan stood before his bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie with trembling hands, the same hands that had negotiated billion-dollar deals, now shaking with the fear of losing everything that truly mattered. In the adjoining room, Nora's gentle voice guided Lila through their morning routine. Their daughter Ethan's heart swelled each time he claimed her, as his own had demonstrated remarkable courage throughout this ordeal. But the strain showed in her quieter moments, in the way she clung to both of them with desperate intensity. Ethan, Nora, appeared in the doorway, radiant despite their circumstances in a navy dress that emphasized her natural grace. The past months had etched new lines around her eyes, but her inner strength blazed like an unquenchable flame. You look absolutely beautiful, Ethan whispered, drawing her into his arms. She felt precious and fragile, like holding liquid starlight that might slip away if he wasn't careful enough. I'm terrified, she confessed against his chest. What if Victor convinces Judge Thompson that I'm everything he claims? What if they believe his lies about us? What if they take Lila away? Ethan silenced her fears with a kiss that conveyed every ounce of his devotion, pouring his soul into the tender connection. When they separated, he cradled her face like holding the most precious treasure on earth. Nora Harper, you are the most magnificent mother who ever drew breath. You raised a daughter who radiates love instead of bitterness, hope instead of despair, courage instead of fear. Any judge with half a brain will see that Lila is living proof of your extraordinary parenting. But what we share together, Nora began, still haunted by Victor's vicious implications. What we share is sacred, Ethan interrupted with fierce conviction. Pure, honest, transformative love that has healed all three of us. We have nothing to hide, darling. We're not ashamed of what we've built. We're a family in every way that truly matters. From the living room came Lila's clear voice. Mama, Daddy Ethan, time to go be brave together. They found her by the door, wearing her finest dress soft pink with tiny pearls that Ethan had chosen because it made her look like the princess she was. Celeste rested securely in her arms, the doll's painted eyes seeming to offer silent encouragement. "Ready, sweetheart?" Nora asked, kneeling to Lila's eye level. "I'm ready, Mama. I know exactly what to tell them." Lila's voice carried steel beneath its sweetness. "I'm going to explain what real daddies do." The courthouse loomed before them like a gray fortress designed to intimidate rather than inspire justice. As they climbed the steps hand in hand, Ethan anchoring one side, Nora the other, with Lila secure between them, Ethan offered a desperate prayer to whatever powers governed love and justice. "Let truth prevail. Let our family survive." Sofia Rivera waited in the hallway, her expression cautiously optimistic. "Judge Thompson is thorough but fair. She'll want to hear everyone's story, including yours. Lila, are you prepared, brave girl?" Lila nodded with solemn determination. "Celeste and I are ready to fight for our family." The courtroom felt vast and imposing. Victor occupied the plaintiff's table with his attorney, projecting calculated respectability that made Ethan's stomach churn. Fresh haircut, expensive suit, practiced expressions of paternal concern, all carefully orchestrated to hide his abandoning, selfish heart. Judge Eleanor Thompson commanded attention, a woman in her 50s with compassionate but penetrating eyes. The thick case file before her testified to months of investigation, medical records, school reports, and character testimonials that Ethan and Sophia had meticulously assembled. Victor's attorney opened with theatrical flourish, painting his client as a reformed man whose mistakes were overwhelmed by his paternal rights. Victor took the stand and delivered an Oscar-worthy performance. Contrite, emotional, claiming he was overwhelmed by his wife's illness, but now prepared to embrace fatherhood with renewed commitment. "Your Honor," Victor declared, his voice breaking with manufactured emotion, "I know I failed my family during their darkest hour. Fear and selfishness drove me to make terrible choices, but I've received counseling, found my strength, and I'm ready to be the father my precious daughter deserves." Ethan studied Judge Thompson carefully, searching for any indication of whether this manipulation was effective. She listened with professional impassivity, occasionally noting observations while revealing nothing of her thoughts. Their turn arrived like dawn after endless night. Sophia systematically presented evidence of Victor's abandonment. Unpaid medical bills, documentation of his affair while married to Nora, records proving 6 months of zero contact or support for Lila. When Nora testified, she spoke with quiet dignity about the reality of single motherhood while battling life-threatening illness. She described selling possessions to buy medicine, rationing food to ensure Lila's nutrition, and the terror of facing potential death while knowing her daughter would have no one. "Mrs. Harper," Sophia asked gently, "please tell the court about the day Lila tried to sell her doll." Nora's voice cracked as she recounted that heartbreaking day, explaining how her 7-year-old had been willing to sacrifice her most precious possession to save her mother's life. "That moment taught me my daughter understood love better than her father ever did," Nora said, looking directly at Victor. "She knew love means sacrifice, putting others first, never abandoning the people you cherish." Ethan's testimony focused on discovering authentic family through Nora and Lila's example. He described the profound joy of homework assistance, bedtime story privileges, and being trusted with a child's deepest fears and brightest dreams. "Mr. Caldwell," Victor's attorney challenged during cross-examination, "haven't you essentially purchased this family, used your wealth to insert yourself into a vulnerable situation for personal gratification?" Ethan had anticipated this attack. "I've used my resources to support people I love unconditionally, yes. But love cannot be purchased through any amount of money. It can only be earned through consistent, faithful actions over time. I've been present for every milestone, every difficulty, every ordinary Tuesday evening for 18 months. That's not wealth, that's unwavering commitment." Finally, Judge Thompson requested a private chambers consultation with Lila. Ethan's heart hammered violently as they waited, knowing everything depended on his little girl's ability to articulate her lived experience with wisdom beyond her years. When they returned, Lila appeared calm but serious. She had confronted the most powerful adult in the room and somehow emerged unbroken, her spirit intact. Judge Thompson resumed her position and surveyed the courtroom with gravity. This case requires determining arrangements serving the child's best interests. I've reviewed extensive documentation, heard testimony from all parties, and spoken privately with Lila Harper. Ethan felt Nora's hand trembling in his. This moment would determine their future together or torn apart. I find overwhelming evidence that Mr. Victor Harper abandoned his family during their greatest crisis. This court cannot ignore 6 months of complete absence, providing zero financial support, maintaining no contact with his daughter, while pursuing romantic relationships with other women, as his wife battled life-threatening illness. Victor's face flushed crimson, but his attorney restrained him from outburst. Conversely, Judge Thompson continued, Mr. Ethan Caldwell has demonstrated consistent commitment to this child's welfare, served as a positive male influence, and supported both mother and daughter through extraordinary hardship with remarkable dedication. Ethan's heart thundered so loudly he was certain everyone could hear it. However, the most compelling testimony came from Lila herself. When asked to describe ideal fatherhood, she stated, "A daddy stays when things get scary, helps with homework even when he's tired, holds you when you cry, and never makes you worry he might leave. A daddy loves your mama and treats her like she's the most precious thing in the world." And tears streamed down Nora's face while Ethan felt his own eyes burning. When I asked which man in this courtroom best embodied that description, she answered without hesitation, "Daddy Ethan. He's been my real daddy since the day he bought Celeste and promised to take care of us forever." "Oh." Judge Thompson looked directly at Victor with steel in her voice. "Mr. Harper, you forfeited paternal rights when you abandoned your responsibilities. This court awards full custody of Lila Harper to her mother, Nora Harper, with a permanent restraining order preventing contact with either mother or daughter without court supervision." The gavel's decisive crack echoed through Ethan's soul like victory bells. They had won. Their family was safe, protected, eternal. Victor stormed out in impotent rage while Ethan gathered his girls in his arms, all three crying tears of relief, joy, and overwhelming gratitude. 1 year later, spring sunshine streamed through stained glass windows of the small church where Nora had been baptized. Ethan stood at the altar, heart overflowing as his bride walked toward him on Dr. Lynn's arm. Their beloved physician had insisted on the honor after becoming family rather than just medical care. Nora wore her grandmother's wedding dress, altered to perfection, carrying white roses mixed with dandelions, Lila's inspired idea, because dandelions are weeds that are actually flowers, just like we're different, but still beautiful families. 9-year-old Lila scattered rose petals with Celeste tucked securely under her arm, her radiant smile proof that love could indeed conquer every obstacle. Ethan marveled at the miracle unfolding. 18 months ago, he'd been a lonely millionaire whose existence held no genuine meaning. Now he was marrying his soulmate and officially becoming father to the most extraordinary child ever born. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, but Ethan heard only his heartbeat and Nora's gentle breathing. He was drowning in her eyes, in the promise of forever that blazed there, in the complete trust and devotion that had transformed them both beyond recognition. Their personally written vows brought every guest to tears. Ethan's voice trembled with emotion. "Nora, you and Lila rescued my soul in ways you'll never fully comprehend. You taught me that genuine wealth isn't measured in bank accounts but in moments of connection, acts of selfless love, and the sacred privilege of being trusted with someone's heart. I promise to love you, protect you, and choose you every single day for the rest of my life and beyond." Nora's response was equally powerful. "Ethan, you appeared in our lives like answered prayers I was too afraid to voice. You showed us that some men stay and fight when things get difficult, that real love grows stronger under pressure. You've been Lila's father in every meaningful way, and my partner through every challenge. I promise to love you with the same fierce devotion you've shown us, to be your sanctuary as you've been ours, forever and always." When pronounced husband and wife, their kiss witnessed cheers and joyful tears from everyone present, but the most beautiful moment came when they turned to face their guests as a family, and Lila threw her arms around both their waists. "We did it," she whispered, loud enough for the front rows to hear. "We're really, truly forever family now." The reception overflowed with love. Ethan's business associates mingling with Nora's nursing school classmates, neighbors from Oak Street sharing tables with Dr. Lynn's family, different backgrounds, races, economic levels, all united in celebration of love that had conquered every obstacle imaginable. As sunset painted the sky in brilliant colors, Ethan danced with his bride while Lila spun in joyful circles nearby, her laughter floating on evening breezes like music from heaven itself. This was everything he'd never known. He needed not grand gestures or expensive possessions, but the simple, profound joy of being surrounded by people who loved him for his heart rather than his wealth. "Mrs. Caldwell," Ethan murmured against Nora's ear as they swayed to gentle music. "How does it feel being married to a man whose greatest achievement isn't his net worth but convincing you to love him completely?" Nora pulled back to meet his eyes, her face glowing with happiness and tears of pure joy. "It feels like coming home after being lost in the wilderness," she whispered. "Like every heartbreak and struggle was preparation for this perfect moment with you." As evening stars appeared overhead and fairy lights twinkled like earthbound constellations, the new family stood together at the exact spot where their story began. Oak Street, now transformed by community improvements they had funded, including a playground where children laughed safely. "Daddy, Ethan," Lila said, tugging his jacket with Celeste dancing in her arms. "Celeste wants to know something important." "What does Celeste want to know, Princess?" Ethan asked, kneeling to her precious eye level. "She wants to know if you're going to keep taking care of us forever and ever, even when things get hard again, because she says life always has hard parts mixed with happy parts." Ethan looked into the face of this remarkable child who had sold her most treasured possession to save her mother, who had testified in court with wisdom beyond her years, who had opened her heart to love him, despite being abandoned by her biological father. "Lila Harper Caldwell," he said with solemn ceremony, "I promise you and Celeste and your beautiful mama that I will love you all for the rest of my life and beyond. When things get easy, when things get difficult, when things get scary, when things get wonderful, I will be right here beside you both." That's what real daddies do, what devoted husbands do, what family members do when they've found their home in each other's hearts. Lila launched herself into his arms. Celeste squashed between them, whispering, "I love you too, Daddy Ethan. Thank you for seeing that Mama and I were worth saving, and for letting us save you right back." As they walked toward their Cara practical SUV, perfect for family adventures rather than status symbols, Ethan reflected on the miracle of their journey. He had arrived on this street as a successful but spiritually bankrupt man whose greatest accomplishment was accumulating wealth. He was leaving as a husband and father whose greatest treasure was the boundless love of two extraordinary women who had taught him life's most important truth. Celeste rode in Lila's lap, her painted eyes seeming to smile with satisfaction that her divine purpose was complete. She had protected those she was meant to guard, brought together the family that was always destined to be, and witnessed love triumph over every form of adversity imaginable. Behind them, Oak Street settled into peaceful evening quiet, forever changed by the story that had unfolded there. It remained the kind of neighborhood where miracles happened, where a child's love could move mountains, where broken hearts found healing, and where guardian angels sometimes arrived wearing expensive suits, carrying both checkbooks and wounded souls in desperate need of redemption. The Caldwell family drove toward their future together, leaving behind a legacy of hope for anyone who had ever doubted love's power to conquer all. In a world rewarding selfishness and cynicism, they had proven that kindness, sacrifice, and unwavering devotion still possessed the power to transform lives and create families from the most unlikely circumstances. Their story would echo through the neighborhood for generations to come, not as fantasy, but as living proof that when we're brave enough to love completely and strong enough to fight for what matters most, even the most shattered hearts can be made whole again, and the most impossible dreams can become beautiful reality.